My name is Robin, and I'm a really grateful Al-Anon. Hi, Jane. And I just love this group and this clubhouse. You guys are amazing. I went to the AA meeting this morning, and it just blew my mind. I mean, it was just so touching. You know, fathers giving their sons chips, and just beautiful stuff in here. You can feel the love. And today, you know, I go where the love is. You know, before I was going the wrong way, looking for love in all the wrong places, but today I go where the love is, and you can definitely feel it here. Before I start, I just want to thank Lance so much for asking me to join you today, and I have just had the best time ever with all of my hosts who have taken such good care of me. Erica and her really great husband, Drew, who's hysterical. We love him. And also Stacy and Corey, who've picked me up at the airport and just showed me such a good time. We've just been having the best time laughing. And I love seeing that Jane is here, my Addison girl. And also Taryn, who was here this morning, is somebody from my group as well. And yeah, I started this is my second time in Al-Anon in 1984 in October. I don't know exactly the date because I was so friggin' crazy when I got here. And one of the little blue-haired ladies, who now that's me, wrote down the day I came in, and it was in October. So I just figure October 31st, Halloween, you know, that kind of fits. That's the time for me. So I've been coming all of that time, and I've lived a lot of my life in Al-Anon. I mean, most of my life has been in the program, in a 12-step program. And I love alcoholics and drug addicts. I mean, I'm not going to specialize on that. Alcoholics, drug addicts, the crazies. And it comes from my own childhood. I was raised in chaos and insanity, and it was just like Skid Row on the inside of our house. We looked good on the outside, everything looked okay, we were going to church, we were doing the deal, my parents had some money, but it was like crazy time inside. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. I knew as a kid, you know, my family's not like everybody else's family. And my mother and my stepfather, whom I was living with, they were both adult children of alcoholics. And I often thought later, I wish to God they had just been drinking, because then I could figure out what the hell was going on, because they were just nuts. I mean, there was like the dining room table at Christmas. My mom's running around with a butcher knife. You know, there's food being thrown. There's my friends' mothers won't let their kids come to my house to have dinner because we're just a little, you know, a little like that. And my stepfather's parents were alcoholics. My biological father's parents were alcoholic. Well, actually, his mother was what I call an alligator. That's an untreated Al-Anon. And I get that from Ellen C. from the Addison group. She calls them alligators. And they were just all crazy, really, really crazy. And I tried to like fix them and control them, and, you know, but what I got from that and what I got from them was I liked excitement and I liked drama, and I was looking for it from the time I was in the sandbox. It was little Billy who was throwing our shoes over the fence and torturing everybody. And I thought, God, he's a lot of fun. You know, I like him. You know, it's kind of scary, but I like that. And so that started basically the dance of death for me. I mean, I just was looking outside of myself. I was looking for something to fill that God-sized hole inside of me that I didn't know I had, and I was looking for something and somebody to fix me. And I had a number of boyfriends. I'm sure today they're all, you know, either dead or in programs, but the one that really, really was the most significant and really took me down was a Vietnam veteran heroin addict. And if you think you can control and manage, and you know, you can't. I tried. And he was also a cocaine dealer. And so we spent some fun time in Malibu, you know, with like rock stars, and you know, I just thought it was so exciting. And you know, he was dying, and I was, you know, worried about, well, where are we going to go next, and what are we going to do next? And you know, I wasn't thinking about things like finishing college. You know, I followed him I was in college in New York, and I followed him back to LA. I was in college in Oakland, California, and I followed him back to LA, and I could not quit him. And there was a few moments of clarity that I had. One was when we were in Oakland, California. I was at a girls' school there called Mills College, and he took myself and my little blonde roommate, and we were going to go get some Coke in Oakland. And I remember looking at where we were and who we were with. I think it was like the Black Panthers or something, and thinking, okay, this is not a good situation to be in. What are you doing here? You know, but that wasn't enough to stop it for me. And I remember trying to have him go through withdrawals and, you know, jonesing in my dorm room. I moved all the furniture, I put pillows out, you know. I mean, how insane is that? And a friend of mine and my roommates took us aside and said, listen, you know, what is wrong with you girls? You know, you are intelligent, you've got things going on, you're in school, you have opportunities. What are you doing? And my roommate had been with this guy who was also an alcoholic, who had driven her 240Z and crashed, and he was fine, but she had lost a couple fingers. Her hand was out the window. And, you know, that was something that she carried with her for the rest of her life. But we just couldn't stop doing what we were doing. And it was that excitement and that drama and that looking for something to fix me outside of myself. It's like the drug of choice. Well, I finally got smart enough and got rid of the heroin addict and moved right on to an alcoholic. And I met the alcoholic, my first husband, at a place called the San Francisco Saloon in Santa Monica. And boy, he was so cute. We were playing backgammon, and I was beating him, and he was drinking, and he was funny. And I was going to go back to his house with him, because that's what we did in the 70s. And there was a lot of that. And I remember him picking me up to take me into his bedroom, and he ran into the wall and fell down and like peed on himself. And I had that moment of clarity of, I don't think I want to do this, you know? This is too much. You know, there was always in the back of my mind that sense of, you know, this is not what you want to be doing, Robin. This is not your best self. And what ended up happening was I got out of there, but, you know, he was back there at the San Francisco Saloon the next week, and he was so sorry, and he was such a good guy, and, you know, he had the talk down, and I sucked me right in. So we ended up getting married, and after he got a DUI, you know, he's in law school, but he got a DUI and somebody got it cleared. It was back when you could clear DUIs. It wasn't as big a deal. I remember saying to myself, it's not that big of a deal. Maybe it's a second, you know, if it's 3 strikes, you're out, but the second one's not so bad. And I remember getting married and knew he was drinking. We got married. Our family was not super supportive of this, neither his nor mine. They could see where this was going. So instead of having the big church wedding, you know, because I have all these great ideas, my idea was, well, let's go to the Virgin Islands and we'll get married there by ourselves and we'll like do the Caribbean and it'll be so fun. So we did that. And we got married at Bluebeard's Castle. You would think that I could have thought that through, you know, the guy who killed all his wives and they're like buried all over the property. But no, that sounded romantic to me. So we got married, and he got so friggin' drunk that night that in the morning when we were supposed to fly to another island, I could not get him up. I could not get him on the plane, and I couldn't get him packed. I mean, it was just exhausting trying to, you know, get him to pull it together so we could go to the next thing that I had planned. And, you know, what I see now is that I can't cause it, I can't control it, I can't cure it, but I sure as hell can contribute to the chaos, and that's what I did. That's exactly what I did. Because even after that, I was still into, okay, we're on another island. That's over. Let's just keep partying. And I did party along with the alcoholic and with the drug addict. I did party along with both of them. And it was just something that it just wasn't, you know, I would rather watch what you were doing and drive you home and change your life and manipulate you and manage you and mother you to death. than do drugs or alcohol. It just wasn't it for me. Later I did get involved. I've been in OA now, Overeaters Anonymous, for 2 years. And what I saw was that I was using food, especially during the pandemic, to kind of like stuff the things I didn't want to feel, the reality I didn't want to face. And it's like I finally got it, 41 years later almost, and I'm like, oh, I get it. It's like I can't eat sugar. It's poison for me. I'm addicted to sugar and white flour. And it's like I didn't get it when it was alcohol. It's like, oh, can't they just really, like tone it down or stop, or how hard is it? And it is really fucking hard. It's not easy at all to do that. So it took me a while. I'm a slow learner. And in that marriage, I remember my husband would be going to work and coming home drunk or not coming home. And I thought, a baby would fix this. That's... Let's bring a child into this insanity. And I was told that I would have to, and I was pretty young at the time, I think I was 24, that I had to start having children early because I had some problems. And so I took that to heart. It's like the doctor said, I've got to try now and have a baby. And that's exactly what I did. And that just made it even worse. I mean, it was so bad. And I was the crazy one. I mean, the poor guy, he'd go to work, he'd drink, he'd come home. The minute he walked in the door, it was like, well, then we have to do this, and then when are you going to do that? And, just that constant barrage of bullshit, because I wanted it to look good on the outside. And what would happen is I started having these panic attacks, which I thought I was having heart attacks. So he would come home, I would leave the baby with him. Now granted, he's drunk usually, so I'm leaving the baby with him, driving myself to the emergency room, sitting in the emergency room, thinking I'm having a heart attack. And in one of those emergency rooms at the South Bay Hospital in Redondo Beach, there was Al-Anon literature there, and AA literature. And I picked it up and I read it, and I'm like, whoa, this is like kind of hitting a few things. And there was, the checklist for if you have a problem with drinking, you might, these are the things. And everything was checking off. But then I went, no, but he just drinks beer. I've been with a heroin addict, alcoholic, Coke dealer, and this is just beer. So how can that be? And that kind of mystified me for a while. But it was enough that I got to a meeting, and I went to the Hermosa Beach Al-Anon Club. And I had to walk through, in the club, there's like the big, huge room with AA, and everybody's like laughing their heads off and having a good time and drinking coffee and, fellowship. And then in the very, very, very back is this little tiny room where all the sad people are. All the sad people who are like crying and, the Al-Anon salute, he's doing it to me. And so that's where I started. And I got a good foundation there. I stayed for about a year, worked the steps, but I was there for relief. I wasn't there for recovery. I wasn't there because I wanted to change my life and have a new design for living. I just wanted to tweak a few things, and if you just put the plug in the jug, our life would go on, and nothing needed to change. And when he came to me and said, you know what, let's go move out we'll buy a house, because we had been renting. It was like, I'll buy you a house and we'll live in the Santa Clarita Valley and you won't need to go to Al-Anon and I won't have to drink. And it was like, okay, that sounds good to me. It's a geographic, but I get a house and, these are all things that I wanted. So I was, it was easy to put that aside. During that time, I do have to tell on myself, this is part of my story, which I'm not proud of, and my living amends today is that I am happily married and I do not cheat on my husband, but I cheated on that husband. And I cheated on him, and I felt like, okay, he's not paying attention to me, and he's gone all the time drinking, and somebody's interested in me, and, why not? I'll just, my thought was that I would just trade, go on to the next guy. And I had enough sense not to do that. I knew I was pretty sick, and that was not the route for me. I wanted to stay with the father of my daughter. And so I did move with him, and I thought it was going to be a whole new thing. And it just started out all over again. And I remember so clearly sitting in the living room waiting and listening for the tires of his car to drive by the street. And I've heard other people share about this. Ellen Cassidy shares about this, and I just identified with it so much. It's like, how could I tell the tires of his tires from anybody else's? But I was sure I could. And I had this little 2-3-year-old, and she'd be like hungry, and I didn't have time to make dinner. I didn't have time to read her a story. I didn't have time to give her a bath and put her to bed because I was waiting at the window. I was ready. I was watching. I was trying to figure out what I was going to say to him that would change him, that would make him do the kinds of things that would make me happy. And what I know today is it is totally an inside job, and that nobody has to change for me to have a happy, wonderful, incredible life. I don't have to do that at all. Everybody can just be exactly who they are. So I started going back to meetings, and there was a clubhouse in Newhall called The Rafters, and I started going there. And I was going a lot. I was going to a lot of meetings. I was doing service. We also had a clubhouse called Langside where they had couches, and I would crawl in my sweatsuit that I wore every single day with my dirty hair, and I would lay on the couch and I would smoke cigarettes because you could smoke then. And it was just, I don't know if I heard anything. That's probably why I didn't know when I came in. I was just exhausted from trying, to make it work. And a couple of times at that meeting, I remember I used to try and escape my husband because that was kind of fun. We used to chase each other. That was part of our little game. And I would go to meetings, and he would find out where I was, or I would go look for him, with the kid in the car driving all over, like crazy stuff. And I remember one morning I had a commitment at a meeting that I had started that had babysitting, and my car wouldn't start, and I'm like, what's going on? So I called my sponsor. I'm like, God, Christine, my car won't start. And she's like, Robin, you had your fucking car at the mechanics yesterday. There's nothing wrong with your car. Your husband has taken something out of it and dismantled it. And I'm like, no, no, that couldn't possibly happen. He would never do that. Well, sure enough, that's what he did. So she came and picked me up, and I went on to the meeting. I just went anyway. And so I just went to meetings no matter what. And, I think if you're living with active alcoholism, it does If you want the alcoholic to start noticing what you're doing, because they usually don't, start going to meetings and be happy and have your own life. That gets their attention really, really fast, because all of a sudden they've got to look at themselves because you're not so crazy anymore. But my husband still had the ability to push buttons and get me to be, I could go right back into the circus at a moment's notice. And but I could see that it was really hurting our daughter. And I remember we used to have these late night, I'm so old now, it's like, we used to go to meetings at 9 o'clock at night and stay till 10:30 and go out for coffee afterwards. And I remember, waiting for him to come home so I could leave the toddler with him and I could go to a meeting. And I remember Scottish Kathy, who was kind of mean. She's been on the program a long time. And I'm telling her my sad story, how, he's doing this and he's doing that, and he's not paying attention to me, and, I don't know what he's doing, and I don't know where the money is, and he won't give me money. And she looked at me and she said, "Where's your daughter?" And I went, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Where is your daughter?" And I said, "Well, she's at home with her dad. She's asleep, I think." And she goes, "He's drinking, right?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And she said, "You get your ass in the car and go home right now and take care of your kid." And it was shocking. I was like, really? I'm responsible for that? It's okay for me to be like the head room mother and the PTA, whatever, but protecting my daughter from that, I couldn't see it. Just couldn't see it. And so I remember having a resentment against Scottish Kathy. But when I look back on it, thank God she could cut through the fantasy world I was living in and go straight to the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation was my kid was not safe there, And it took a little bit more. I went to a counselor, a therapist who had I think she was also in AA. And she basically said, because there was so much craziness going on in our house, that she, constant fighting and yelling and, everything. I think I threw things at him. He threw things at me a couple times. I had a bruise on my arm once. But I would have hit me too. I know I shouldn't say that, but they teach us in Al-Anon not to get in your face when you're using or drinking. It's like, don't do that. But I just had to do that. I had to say one more thing to piss him off. And, so a lot of that stuff I did on my own, and I contributed to the chaos. I was the chaos. Oh, that's so great. I love seeing kids in meetings. And the counselor said to me, she said, Robin, if you don't do something, I'm going to have to report you to social services. And I'm like, what? I am this really good mother. Everybody says that. And that, yeah, really. Although I was not doing what needed to be done. And so that kind of scared me a little bit, but it wasn't quite enough. What it took for me is we were playing the chase game one more time, and I got in my car, and I was driving away, and he got in his car, and he was chasing me, and I look, it just chokes me up even today. I look in the rearview mirror, and there is my daughter running down the street going, help, help. That's how selfish and self-centered and focused on ourselves that we were. We could not see, what was going on with her and how this disease was affecting her. And my husband both of his parents were alcoholic as well. And, we had just been raised in that, and that seemed normal to us. That just seemed like that's what you do. You get married and you run around chasing each other and drinking and, carousing and being crazy. And that was it for me. At that point, I filed for divorce, and I knew I was done. But he still had to stay. He was still in the house, and it was still really bad in the house, really bad. And I had an attorney. I tried to do an intervention. I did all this stuff to try and save the marriage, and it just wasn't happening. And sometimes, relationships that are born in sickness, they just don't survive, and you got to let go. And I had to let go of that. I had to let go. So I ended up having to call the cops on him one night. He came in, and he was really drunk, and he left all the doors and the windows open, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I called my attorney. It's like, what do I do? What do I do? And she's like, call the cops. She was in AA. And, Jennifer is the one who sat me down and said, honey, there's no love here. He's not going to change. He can drink like this for the next 40 years. Do you want to live like that? And it was like, no, I don't want to do that. I had that moment of clarity. And so the cops came. They didn't arrest him. He hid. But then when he came back later, he knew that I had called the cops, and he knew that, I was going to continue to do that, and it wasn't going to work anymore. And so he did move out. And he moved out, and I was terrified. I was so scared. I had been a stay-at-home mom. I hadn't worked. I had a college degree, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to really pay bills. There was so much that I didn't know how to do. And they walked me through it in Al-Anon. The women in Al-Anon just walked me through it. This is what you do next. You do this next. You do that. And I enrolled in school. I started going to school, and my life started getting better. I went to school to get a master's in education, and it was really good. But before that happened, I wasn't done with being emotionally and spiritually immature and bereft. I wasn't quite done. So, I got the alcoholic out, and so I started going to the Rafters, that clubhouse, and they had dances, and it was like fun, and it was like AA campus, and I was running around wearing leather skirts and halter tops and stiletto heels, and so I got what you get when you do that. And I ended up with this really good-looking man who supposedly was 5 years sober, and we did a lot of fun things together. And in my mind, we were going to go on the AA Al-Anon speaker circuit together, But I knew something was not right, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And we went to a convention in, not Las Vegas, the other one that's near Las Vegas. I can't remember. And he kept saying he wanted to get married. And I just had this sense of, no, I do not want to get married again, and not to him. Something is not right. And I couldn't figure it out. And what happened was shortly after that, I found a video camera that was set up in my daughter's bedroom. Yeah. And she was 9 years old, changing with her friends on this video camera, and she came out and she said, "Mom, what's this camera doing?" And it's like instant, I got it. And he was in the backyard by the pool, and I picked up one of those patio chairs, the really spiky ones, and I just went after him. I was gonna fucking kill him. And I chased him out to the driveway, and I'm hammering on the car with my chair, and he took off, and I called the cops, and I'm glad that I did, because apparently he was molesting a friend of ours, junior high student, and so there was a lot of stuff going on. And I know that there's a lot of incest and sexual abuse in families like ours. I know that happens. But I was so broken behind that. And for a long time, I don't know what it is. I must like the chase, because he was stalking us for a while, and I had to put an emergency order in to get an alarm system. And I got really crazy. I got to the point where I was looking for guns, and I was going to kill him. And he did end up going to jail for probably not as much time as I would have liked. But it was just really bad. And I would go to meetings and I would share about it, and people would look at me and go, "Are you sure he did that? He's such a good guy, and are you really, really sure?" And it got to the point where I'd go to meetings and I'd be the one sharing about, sexual molestation, and the whole room would go like this, like, "Don't talk about that anymore, we're tired of that." But it was part of my story, and I'm not proud of it, and it's had a lot of repercussions on my life ever since. And there's been a lot of shame associated with that, a lot. And I've had to get to the point where I realize that if God forgives me, and if I've made amends for what I exposed my daughter to, then how can I continue to beat myself up for it and make myself feel horrible and shamed? Then that's me trying to play God. I had to let it go. But it took many, many years, and a lot of therapy and a lot of meetings. So I finished up my teaching, got a teaching credential, started teaching, and I was a teacher a very short period of time. I had to make more money, and so I got an administrative credential. School was really good for me, even as a child, because my house was so nuts that I liked going to school. It's like it was consistent, there were rules, you had a seat where you sat. It wasn't like my house where there were no meals, there were people just, running around like crazy. So I really liked school, and I was really good at it. I was a really good teacher, and a job came up at a continuation high school. And I don't know if you have those in Utah, but in California, there are schools for kids like ours. Kids that are in gangs, kids that are addicted, kids that are from families like ours. And I swear to God, he picked me up and he put me in that job, and I did not know what I was doing, but I had the program behind me. And I would sit at my desk sometimes and I would just pray. I'd say, "God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Tell me, give me the strength to do what needs to be done." And I have to say, in all the years, 15 years I was in that job, I was never afraid of those kids. I loved those kids, loved them. They were the best kids in the world, and they were scary kids. But I'd be at the mall with my friends, and Jorge would come up, and he's huge and has tattoos, and go, "Mrs. G," and give me a big hug, and my friends were like, "Who? What is that?" And I'd go, "That's one of my kids. He's one of mine." And we were able to turn that school from, and it's only because of the program, from 90 kids to 500 by the time I left. We had meetings at the school. Any teacher who was not committed and loved kids the way I did, I got rid of them. It's like, these kids have had the worst teachers. They need the best. They need people who are real. And they called us by our first names. There were consequences and stuff. We did do that. We loved them, but it was like tough love often enough. And one of the things that we all sat down with as faculty and we were like, what's going on, what do we need to work on? And the teachers all said they're all stoned every day. The kids are stoned all the time. And I can't reach them, they're not there. And so that's when we started meetings. And that's when one of the parents at our school had a rehab center, and God bless him, if I had a kid who had no insurance, could not pay, he took every single kid I ever sent to him, and I sent hundreds to him. And he'd go, Robin, does this one have insurance? And I'd go, nope. And he just did the right thing because he was in the program. And we had a lot of gangs at that school. When I first got there, one day I walked out in the quad and there's like all these butcher knives all over the quad and out into the street. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I've got gangs here. I can't have butcher knives. What's going on? So I went into the food room. There was a food service room. And there was this dingling teacher who left open the cabinet. And I opened the cabinet and there's like 10 butcher blocks with knives, butcher knives in them. And it's like, who thought this was a good idea to have butcher knives at a continuation high school? So I put them all in my trunk of my car and donated them. We were lucky nobody got stabbed that time. I had a kid once run into my office and throw his backpack on my desk, and he was like agitated and like crying. And I said, what's wrong, Joe? What's wrong? And he said, look in the backpack, look in the backpack. And I'm like thinking, I do not want to look in the backpack. I don't want to know. And I did, and it was a gun. And he starts crying, and he said, my friend brought that to school today and he was showing it off in art class, and I love this school and I love the teachers here and the people here, and I just can't let this happen here. I can't let this happen here. And so that's the impact that the program had on these kids. I mean, they were transformed. We had kids graduating. We had like a 98% graduation rate. A lot of our kids went into the military. They went into college. They went into art school. They went into tech school. We used to have kids that were in Afghanistan call us. Oh, this will make me cry. They'd call the office because they didn't have parents or family that they could call. And I would put them on the speakerphone. They couldn't tell us where they were, but I kind of figured it out. And I'd bring the teachers in to talk to them, and we would just tell them, we love you, we care about you, be safe. And that's the gift of this program, because these are kids that, nobody cared about. Nobody wanted to, to have them around. And they were just beautiful kids who did incredible things. We kind of got the gang thing quieted down. It got to the point where they respected us enough that I would say, if you've got to do this, you can't do it at school. You can't do it to and from school. I don't want you to do it. Here's some people you can talk to about it before you do it, but you just can't do it. And they respected us enough to do that. I also made sure I hired people who looked like the kids. That was really, really important. We had Big Manny, who was huge, an ex-gang member, and the kids just loved him and talked to him. We had an African-American former police officer who was there and talked to the kids. We had counselors who were Latino who spoke Spanish so that the parents could understand what was going on. It was a beautiful place. We had guitar classes. We had computer classes. I wanted those kids to have what the rich kids had. And I had been to a really nice private school myself, and so I just did what those kids needed, and they got it, and they had therapy. We had equine therapy. And I was able to make amends to my daughter by making a living amends to the kids at that school. And I'll never forget, there was one girl, Jackie, who just would not come to school. She just wasn't coming to school. I was hunting her down. And I mean, if you got an Al-Anon on your tail, we could open a detective agency. We'll find you. We will. We'll find you. And so I found her and I brought her back to school, and she's sitting in my office. And I'm like, what is going on with you? I just can't do this with you anymore. What is going on? You've got to tell me what is happening. And she finally broke down and cried. And this was a hard girl. And for her to cry like that. And what had happened is when she was about 3 or 4, her mother she had found her mother, who was a drug addict, who had hung herself in the closet. This little girl found her mom there. And her father and grandfather proceeded to molest her for the next 5 years, 5, 6 years. And I was able to make sure that she got the therapy and she got the support that she needed. And, those are miracles. And those are evidence of God. I look for evidence of God today, and I see it. I see it looking at all of you and your faces and the commitment that you have to this Al-Anon club. This is evidence of God. And I look for the miracles today. Back then, there were so many miracles, but I couldn't see them because I wasn't spiritually fit. I didn't have that conscious contact with God that I have today, where, it's like I get in the car, it's like, all right, God, let's haul ass. If you're not with me today, I'm screwed. And that's just the way it is. During that time, and I'll backtrack a little bit. When I first came to the program, I did not want to hear God stuff ever. And my parents had been really, really religious. And I remember when I'd get sick, my mom would throw the Bible at me when I was a kid and say, heal yourself. I wasn't vaccinated. There's a whole thing. And I have forgiven her, and I love my mom today and have a good relationship with her. But it was weird. So I came in and I saw the steps and the traditions and God. And I'm like, okay, God is a terrorist to me. Good things have not happened to me behind God. So my sponsor at the time said, Betty, who's passed away, she said, I want you to just pray for parking spots. When you're out driving around and there's no parking spots, I want you to pray for parking spots. Pray to God. And I'm like, okay. I thought, you're crazy, Betty. But I did it, and I would find parking spots. And I would pray to God and say, God, find me a parking spot. And it was kind of like, God, find me a parking spot. I don't believe in you, but that's what I did. And I would find them. And so I had the parking spot God for a couple years. I mean, really. And today, if you're with me, I always get a parking spot, always. So, the first 3 steps were hard for me. And I think that's why Al-Anon didn't take, the 12-step program didn't take for me the first time, is I could not surrender to the God of my understanding. I didn't understand God. I didn't have a God of my understanding, so I had to get a God. And I've heard somebody say that she has a God who adores her. And that kind of freaked me out. It's like a God who adores you, a God who loves you, a God who's there with you and walks you through whatever you have to go through. It's like, what a concept. But that's the kind of God I have today. I have a God who takes care of me. And I have a God that no matter what I have to walk through, I do not have to do the kinds of behaviors that I did before. I don't have to do it. And now I've added to it, I don't have to eat sugar or white flour, which, I've been abstinent now 2 years, and it has taken away a lot of the fog. Also, I want to say, too, about the 4th step. It's kind of like being at the mall, and you have the little, when we used to have malls, and there was the little legend of where everything was. That's kind of how the 4th step is for me. It's like, okay, I find out where I am and where I have to go and how I get there. And it's kind of like a map. And the 5th step really removes the shame. When we can share with another person the exact nature of our wrongs and our character defects and that secrets that, we're so sick with secrets that when we can get that out, that poison out to another human being who doesn't judge us and loves us anyway, that heals us. That is so healing. And I know today that there's nothing that I could do that would ever take me away from that love of God. Not ever. Nothing. So about that time, I'm at this school, I'm working really hard, I have a really good sponsor, Lynn, that I've had to this day, and she has a great marriage. She and her husband love each other, and they do fun things together, and I'm kind of thinking, okay, maybe I'm ready after many, many years of working on myself, maybe I'm ready for a relationship. And poor Lynn, she had 5 of us, and we were like women that you would think, okay, they're never going to be able to be married. There's not a chance. There was Kim, who was would just scream, and, every other word was the F word, and, we were like, I don't know, the Dirty Dozen or something. We were so bad. And so she took us on, and all of us ended up getting married. We wanted what she had, and we did what she did, and we got married. And as far as I know, today, all of us are married, and I will have 20 years with my husband Rob coming up in July. And that's like a miracle. I mean, that is, to get with the pattern of insanity that I came from, to get where I can be married and have a partner and be loyal and kind, and that's just incredible. And when I married Rob, he had a son, Zach, and Zach is one of those fun ones. And I just love this. He's 38 now, and I love him so much. I took him to his first AA meeting. When I first met Rob at his house, and I first met Zach, rather, after Zach left, I asked my husband, I said, well, have you ever had him drug tested? This is before we got married. And he goes, no, do you think he's on drugs? And I said, yeah, I think he's dealing out of your house. And he was. And we laugh about that now. But Zach's mom died when he was 12, and he was just the wild child. I mean, he was all over the place. But that kid had a heart of gold. I mean, he was just incredible. And he was like racing Harleys and going all over the mountains in Malibu and going over on the side with his motorcycle, and just a crazy. I remember we took him out to dinner, and he goes out on the freeway on one wheel, and I'm like, oh my God, don't do that in front of me. But he was homeless for a number of years. There came a point where we just couldn't do anything with him, and so he was homeless. And, homeless in Malibu. What was he living at? Mel Gibson's ex-wife's ranch with the Australians, So he did that for a number of years. And he finally found this cute little Al-Anon type girl, just beautiful girl. And they got married, and they have 2 children. They live in Wisconsin. And a year ago, he turned himself in. He was going to lose. He was blowing up his marriage. He was blowing up the children. He was blaming everybody for the situation he was in. He was not, it was everybody else's fault. And he got sober. And it's just a miracle. I just love him. I mean, he's just the best. He's somebody you'd really love to just hang out with. He's funny. He's wild. And out of the 2 little boys, one of them, Ryder, who's 4, is like the teacher's pet. Everything he does is perfect. And then there's the 2-year-old. There's Fox. And Fox had to wear a helmet the first year of his life because Fox was like balls to the wall. Whatever, if there's something to jump off of, he would do it. I mean, you just look at him, and he's got that, that look of sparkly eyes. So it's going to be fun seeing what happens with Fox. I'm not going to label him anything, but, he is definitely one of my favorites. And then there's my daughter, who ended up marrying her college sweetheart, finally. And they live in San Francisco. And I have 2 grandchildren there. Jack is 13, and he's like 6'1". His parents are giants. And Georgia, who is 12 and has quite an attitude. And my daughter and I had a hard time, for many, many years. There was that, no matter how much I made amends, no matter what I did differently, no matter how much I had changed, she would have periods of time where it would come up for her and she would blame me again. But then there would be periods of time where she would say, you're not the same person, Mom. You're not the same person anymore. And 2 years ago, it came up again, and it was really, really bad. And she stopped me from seeing my grandchildren, who were just like the love of my lives. It was so close to them and spent so much time with them, and it was really, really hard. And I had to listen to her say hard things, and just listen, and just, pray a lot. And it got to the point where she was getting pretty abusive with it. And I had inherited some money from my dad's death. And she was kind of like, well, you need to pay me money because this happened to me. And there was just a lot of that. And it was just getting really ugly. And my sponsor said, you can't keep listening to this. This isn't right. You can't. It's not good for her. And I think she's probably drinking. I don't know. Her husband drinks a lot. And I had to set a boundary with her, and I had to say, I love you more than anything in the world, but if you're going to treat me like this, I can't see the kids and I can't see you. You've got to treat me with respect. I deserve that, and if you can't do that, I wish you well. And if you ever want to go to therapy and, do a session or 2 together, I'm there for you in an instant. And setting that boundary with her was a good thing because she started treating me better. And today we have a pretty decent relationship. We talk on the phone. We don't see each other as much as we did, but she will call me and tell me the things that her kids are saying to her, and boy, she's getting it all back. That little Georgia, oh my gosh. she's and I'm not happy about that, but it does make it a little easier. I gotta be truthful. That's the truth, And she'll even say, "Oh, Mom, you'll love this. This is what they said to me," and they're just brutal. So those of you who have young kids and teenagers, you just gotta listen and you just gotta pray, because all the stuff that we did, boy, it's just so different when it comes from our own kids, completely. So what happened to me when she went through that period is I got really, really sick behind that. I got suicidal. I just was so torn down, thinking that you did this to your beautiful daughter and she's not okay. And I was praying and praying and praying, God, what do I do? What do I do? And the answer, it was so weird, because I hear like God's voice. And God said to me, go to OA. And I'm like, I literally said out loud, what the fuck, God? Are you kidding me? You want me to go to OA? And I've been here long enough that I listened, and I did. And I heard what I needed to hear. I heard, and what's so great about OA and the Addison group is they go straight to the big book. They go straight to the AA 12 and 12. And that's where the answers are. The answers are in the steps. The answers are in the literature. It is such an incredible, divinely inspired program, and has saved so many lives, and that's where it is. So I really like going to the Addison meeting where they recognize AA, and that's really important to me. So I started doing that, and I started feeling better, and I started taking better care of myself. I have an incredible life today. My father, who was very violent, and to this day where I live, if people know that he's my father, or that they know that last name, they go, oh my God, he was a monster. He bit off part of his ex-wife's nose. He held a girlfriend over one of his apartment buildings and threatened to drop her. And he did this sober, He was just crazy. And he did some things to me. He used to grab me by the neck and throw me up against the wall. But he was tricky. He would look through the house to see that nobody was there first before he did that. And it was difficult having a relationship with him. It was not easy. And I had to put boundaries. And if I went to visit him, after an hour, I'd have to leave because he'd get nuts. And I learned to park my car so I could immediately get away when I had to get away. But I loved him, and I was kind to him, and I worked the principles of the program with him. And he died of Alzheimer's, late-stage Alzheimer's. And it was a pretty brutal death, watching him go through that. But I was there with him at his bedside, feeding him ice chips. I suited up and I showed up. And there were so many times he had just said to me, you don't do what I want. I'm writing you out of the will. You're not going to get anything. And I was like, okay, I don't want anything. I don't care. I don't care. And instead, I did get stuff. And the thing that I got that is just amazing to me is I got this incredible beach house on the beach. I mean, every window of my rooms, I see the beach, the ocean. And I was a beach girl. I was a surfer girl. So this is so meaningful to me. And I had lived for 30 years basically out in the desert. And when I first moved into the house, I had a dream where he was standing at the end of the cobblestone driveway, and there was a gate, and it was like misty and foggy, and he came to me, and he said, Robin, I'm so sorry. I was such a bad dad, and you deserve somebody so much better, and I love you, and I'm so proud of you, and thank you for taking care of the business. You're doing it all, and take care of your brother. And then he just disappeared. And I have not had this is a man that I was in a lot of therapy over this, and it was always about him. And I had let go of that completely. That relationship was healed. Today, my mom is 98 years old, and she's in, she's so cute. She's in a really nice assisted living place, real fancy one in Simi Valley. And, she's poor thing, since she can't really see or hear anymore, and religion was really her big thing that saved her and kept her kind of mellow. Now she doesn't have that, and she's acting out a lot. So I went to go visit her recently, and I go into the dining room, and there's all the people just sitting there peacefully, and there's my mom with a big spoon and a coffee cup, and she's like wailing on it, like, give me my hot chocolate right now. And I'm screaming, and I'm able to just be there and hold her hand and love her and know that, she did the best that she could, and I don't have any resentments towards her at all. All of that has been lifted. And I'm getting close to closing. There's a couple things that I wanted to read to you in closing, and many of these are from the Addison meeting, and if you want to know how to get there, talk to me, Lance, or Jane. I came into the program with the gift of desperation, and I'm really glad I had that. And I've had to ask myself over and over again, is it a problem to be solved or a reality to accept? My best ideas limit my God, and my higher power plans ahead in love for me. When I judge, I separate me from you. I am enough, I do enough, I have enough. There's awareness, acceptance, but before you go to action, I think it's Sandy Beach who says this, make a sandwich, take a break. Awareness, acceptance, take a break, and then action. And nobody has to change today for me to be okay. And the basis of every spiritual program is self-acceptance. And as a result of that, God meets me where I am. And then I'll end with the 5 Gs. I just love these. Get off their back, get on with your life, get out of their way, give them to God, and go to a meeting. Thank you.